le seigneur Ian McDiarmid sur scène. Mais quelques petites choses. Premièrement, vous allez peut-être devoir m'aider avec la translation, la traduction, parce que anglais c'est généralement plus simple pour moi, et après je dois trouver les mots et tout ça. Donc si je fais des fautes, je m'excuse. La conjugaison française c'est un peu... je trouve ça un peu dur. Si, c'est dur monsieur, c'est dur. Donc voilà, et le plus d'amour que vous donnez, le plus d'amour que vous allez recevoir, c'est simple, mais ça va être super. Surtout parce que c'est le 20e anniversaire de Revenge of the Sith, épisode 3. Oui, c'est mon préféré. Donc voilà, donc mesdames et messieurs, êtes-vous prêts? Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue sur scène, Ian McDiarmid!
Bon anniversaire! Oh, I always do that when I wear a hood.
Il fait toujours cette voix quand il a une capuche. Oh, you've got black. You've got a black hood. I've got a white hood. Donc bienvenue, Ian.
Merci.
What's your favorite French word? Just a little icebreaker. Le mot préféré français, c'est quoi?
Oh, c'est très difficile. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
C'est ça.
Simple.
Et bonsoir.
It does the job.
Et bonne nuit. C'est toi.
So it's the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith.
Sure is.
And personally speaking, it is actually my favorite.
Really? It's mine too.
It is my favorite. And when it first came out, I was at school, and people were angry that it was my favorite. For some reason, they wanted, 4, 5, and 6. That was the OGs.
Oh, yeah.
And I never grew up with Star Wars, so I started when episode 1, 2, and 3 came out.
I see.
And 3, for me, was such a tragic story of love. It was a love story.
Yeah. Yes, in a way.
So why for you why is the third episode your favorite? Pourquoi est-ce que le troisième épisode c'est son préféré?
Well, from an acting point of view, I had the most lines, so that was good. But also, it's the big transformation scene, you know. It's when he finally comes out of his politician shell into the most evil monster that ever lived. So that just had to be my favorite.
Son épisode préféré, c'est parce que il y avait la transformation entre sénateur et empereur, et ça c'était son préféré, mais aussi il y avait plus de lignes, plus de texte, donc c'est pour ça qu'il s'est amusé. What is your favorite thing about playing the duality of the monstrous evil person and the somewhat quiet senator?
That's an interesting question. Yes, well, he started off as a fairly normal human being, you thought, an ordinary politician. And then as it goes on, you realize this man is being really rather hypocritical. And then by the time we get to imperial status, at the end of Revenge of the Sith, he has gone mad with power. And what's interesting about it is, just from my point of view as an actor, is portraying somebody who's always wanted to be the most powerful creature that ever lived, but he plays a very long and subtle game to get there and uses, wait for the surprise, democracy to achieve his horrible authoritarian ends. And frankly, there's a lot of that about.
Donc il y a beaucoup de authoritarianism, je ne sais pas comment on dit ça, mais en ce moment les États-Unis ressemblent un petit peu au monde de Star Wars. Et une des choses qu'il adorait, c'était jouer la dualité entre le sénateur et le empereur. Mais bien sûr, le sénateur savait qu'il jouait un long jeu. Tu vois, il savait qu'il voulait être empereur de l'univers. Et donc, en tant que comédien, c'était un plaisir. Voilà. Il y a des questions pour le... Oui, bien sûr. OK. We'll go straight for questions.
Hello, very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Here's my question. What was it like to play in movies like Sleepy Hollow from Tim Burton and The Lost City of Z by James Gray?
Can you just give me that again? It's just a little difficult to hear. Your English is good.
So he's asking about what was it like to play in other movies like Sleepy Hollow?
Yes.
What was the transition? C'était
Yeah.
comment la transition entre, disons, Star Wars et jouer Sleepy Hollow? Parce qu'il est connu pour Palpatine.
Well, yes, I mean, I'm an actor. I like to do lots of different things. And usually when you finish one job, you hope the next job will be as different as the last one. And you never quite know what it's going to be. And Sleepy Hollow was a good example. He was a sort of terrified doctor. So to go from, you know, the biggest monster that ever lived to a terrified doctor is a big contrast. That film was fun too, because there were lots of other actors I knew very well, and we all had a ball thanks to Tim Burton, and of course Johnny Depp. So it's true, every time you do something and something else is different, and maybe with more of a comic edge, i.e. funny, you know, that's very rewarding. And I just like to do as many different things as often as possible.
Quand tu es comédien et acteur, c'est toujours un plaisir de jouer des autres personnages. Et donc dans Sleepy Hollow, c'était un docteur qui avait un peu la trouille et il y avait un peu d'humour, donc c'était complètement différent à Palpatine. Et aussi, Ian McDiarmid, il vient d'une carrière de Shakespeare, il a fait plein de Shakespeare. I don't know how many Shakespearean plays you did before you even entered the screen, but you were pretty renowned on the Shakespearean world.
And I was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-on-Avon for a long time. And if once you got that, as it were, after your name, people think you're a Shakespearean actor. It's a little more complicated.
How many different characters in the Shakespeare catalogue have you played?
Yes, well, I've gone from the magician Prospero to various other parts, and I suppose the one that I always have a longing to play, Claudius and Hamlet is another play. He's not a very nice person, but you can see his point of view. But the one that awaits me, I hope one day, no plans yet, I'll let you know, that excites me the most is King Lear. And the thing about that part is he's exactly the age I am now, so I wouldn't have to do any old acting, which is always a good thing when you're acting. But the thing about Shakespeare is, you know, some of you may feel, well, you know, it's a bit daunting, you know, it's a little bit complicated. It's not really, if you can get a bunch of good actors, because he writes brilliantly, and the feelings and the thoughts and all of the ideas that you'd have in a contemporary play are there. And I think our job as actors is to make it as real and accessible to you as possible. So if I ever get to do King Lear and you happen to be around somewhere in the United Kingdom, come and see it, and if I don't make it accessible to you, I'll give you your money back.
Donc il a fait plein de rôles de Shakespeare et bien sûr il y a tellement de diversité. Il a joué Prospero par exemple dans The Tempest, et un rôle qu'il aimerait bien jouer, qu'il n'a jamais joué, c'est King Lear. Et King Lear c'est le roi qui perd son empire et après il devient fou. That's right, he loses his empire and then he becomes crazy. Et donc ça c'est un rôle qu'il aimerait bien jouer parce qu'il a maintenant l'âge à jouer King Lear. Et ce qui est chouette, c'est pas le mot, mais ce qui est super avec le monde de Shakespeare, c'est que c'est contemporain. En fait, les thèmes sont universels. Et ça peut être un peu dur à comprendre au début, mais quand tu as des comédiens talentueux, ça résonne et ça bouge très beau. So une chose que, I think I would like to ask you, that is, I was going to do a little test with you on your Shakespeare knowledge. Je vais le tester sur Shakespeare. A little test from As You Like It. 'Tis such fools as you that makes the world full of ill-favoured blank.
What am I supposed to do?
You have to fill in the blank.
Oh, I can't do it, sorry.
No?
No.
Should we skip this whole thing?
Let's, shall we?
Should we do it?
Yes, good.
But you know what? This is a gift. This is a gift. All of Shakespeare's insults.
Oh, thank you.
C'est tous les insultes de Shakespeare.
Yes. I'll work on this.
Mais
Yes. It's not, he hasn't just chosen the easy ones. I could die in front of you if you went on with this. Good. I'll look at them at home, and the next time we meet, I'll have every answer.
Hey, I wasn't sure. On n'est pas ici pour Shakespeare, donc on va arrêter ça. Mais c'était un petit test. It was a little test. How does let's just now transition from Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Which Shakespearean play is most like Star Wars?
I suppose it's hard to answer that question because so many have so much in common with Star Wars' journey, if you think about it. I suppose Macbeth, maybe. That's about a guy who, rather like Anakin, really, who starts off well and good, up to a point, but there's always something in him that's not quite right, and they both are, very ambitious. And as Macbeth goes on, and round about middle age, his wife, a very important part of the play, Lady Macbeth, she says, you've got an opportunity now to run the country. All you have to do is to kill the very old, frail king. And if you don't do that now, you'll never be king. So she, in a sense, he's got it in him already, like Anakin, I think. She tempts him to go full throttle to the dark side. And of course, it doesn't end happily, as it very rarely does. It ended happier than most of us thought it was going to for Palpatine, because we thought he was dead, didn't we, after Return of the Jedi. But then, of course, being a very, very clever man, he always had a plan B. So he knew that should he be mortally, but not quite mortally wounded, he would have a way of cutting back. And also he had the best surgeons in the world. So they reconstituted his body, gave him a flying astral wheelchair, and the rest was okay because his mind was as sharp as ever. Macbeth meets an unhappy end, really, but he also deserves it. But the great thing about Shakespeare is you think, well, he probably would have been a good king if he'd been able to go about it in the right way. But once he committed a murder, that was the end of it, you know. He couldn't possibly command the respect of a large number of people on a regular basis. So Macbeth, I suppose, is the long answer to your question.
Je voulais juste transitionner de Shakespeare à Star Wars. Je voulais juste savoir quel pièce, thank you. Quelle pièce est plus comme Star Wars? Mais en fait, presque tous les épisodes sont des différentes pièces, tu vois. Mais Macbeth, c'est probablement le plus proche parce que c'est une tragédie. Enfin, ils sont presque tous des tragédies, mais voilà. Et donc, so that's good. Quick question about the necessity of evil. Right, so obviously Star Wars is so much about the balance of the universe, and therefore, what really is the difference between Sith and Jedi? If they complement each other, are they not like the yin and yang of one another? And therefore, is Palpatine really that evil, or is he just playing the part that is necessary for balance?
That's a really good, sophisticated question. The answer is yes, he's really that evil. But in the whole saga, I mean, George's conception of it. And the great thing about George was he never sort of laid it out, he never conceptualized, he never editorialized. He tried to present you with as entertaining a film as he could muster. But in amongst all that, there's a lot of subtle stuff going on. And we don't really know about the Siths. I mean, maybe one day somebody will make a film about the young Palpatine, and then we'll probably learn a bit more. But we just know that they're an alien force, and they, in general terms, represent evil, and the Jedi, in general terms, represent good. But, you know, one reason you like all that is that we're all neither one thing nor the other. I mean, we hope we err on the good side rather than the evil. But, you know, back to Macbeth again, sometimes it's quite easy to do, to go to that side. But I don't think, see, as far as I could work out, and you know, I didn't do those films in order, as you know. So every time, thank goodness, George asked me to come back, or JJ asked me to come back, I had no idea what the character was going to do, because you don't get a script until the last minute. I didn't mind that. I thought that was quite exciting. So it meant that I had to think fast about any kind of character development. But I think he was, the Sith are not, I mean, Sith is of course an anagram. I think you probably worked that out. So that sort of sums up everything that Palpatine and his pals were. But it's interesting too, in the real world you can start by doing evil and end up doing good. That's more difficult probably. But it's easier to, as it were, do the other thing the other way around, because apparently power and money corrupt. Yeah.
Donc j'avais demandé la question que c'est quoi vraiment la différence entre un Sith et un Jedi, parce que bien sûr les Jedi sont les bons et les Sith sont le mal, mais ils ont besoin des deux en fait. Si l'univers de Star Wars est à propos de la balance dans l'univers, les deux ont besoin d'être réels, ils ont besoin d'exister. Donc est-ce que vraiment Palpatine c'est un méchant ou pas? La réponse est oui, apparemment. C'est un méchant. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Yes.
What was your favorite moment as Palpatine?
There were a few of those, but the favourite one, to be honest with you, was the scene in the opera. You know, when we were all watching, when we filmed it, we didn't know what we were going to watch. You know, I said to George, what's going on? He was like, I don't know what's going on. Okay, fine. And later on I discovered it was a squid ballet. I'm kind of glad I didn't know that in advance, but there you are. But the great thing about that scene, it was supposed to be originally in an even bigger office than the ones you'd seen before. And George said, you know, I've had enough of offices, let's go to the theatre. You'll like that, Ian, you know, referencing previous remarks. So I said, oh, that sounds good. And what was really good about it was, because Anakin and I, we were just on, well, we were like this. I was in your position and he was here, and we were in two simple chairs, not as luxurious as these wonderful sofas. And the opera, as it were, was where you are. And what that means is you can talk to the person you're playing with, like that. And you can also do that while pretending to watch the squid ballet. So you can, as it were, feed things into his ear while showing you, the audience, in a way that's not obvious what is really going on. So I was able to do, I thought, two things at once, and that was challenging, but it was very enjoyable. So yeah, that's my favourite scene in all of the movies, and as far as the ones I'm in are concerned.
Donc ce moment préféré, sa scène préférée dans Star Wars, c'est quand il jouait avec Anakin Skywalker et il parlait subtilement, et il disait des choses à Anakin pour essayer de le changer au dark side, mais en même temps, il devait regarder du théâtre. Mais quand il a demandé à George Lucas qu'est-ce que je suis en train de regarder là, George il savait pas. Il dit je sais pas, il y a quelque chose qui se passe. Et c'était une danse de squids, de pieuvres. Canamar. Ok, une danse de canamar. Mais il savait pas, et il était content qu'il savait pas parce que sinon ça le troublait. Et donc il y avait un petit jeu qui était sympa parce qu'il pouvait se parler avec Anakin et après il pouvait regarder les canamars. I just learned a new word.
No.
Squid is canamar. What was your first impression of the world of Star Wars when you first got the script?
Yes, well, terrible thing to say. I had seen the first movie, you know, New Hope, as it later became, and I thought, that's great. That's just like the movies I used to go and see on a Saturday morning when I was a kid. You know, so from that point of view, I enjoyed it, never imagining it would have anything to do with me apart from that. But, you know, you probably know this, but it's worth tuning again because it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's a kind of miracle. I mean, my agent got a call saying George Lucas wants to meet Ian McDiarmid. Okay, so he called me and said, I've just heard that George Lucas wants to meet you. I thought, well, that's very nice. And there was a car outside, I got in it. I went to the studios, was it Pinewood or was it Elstree? I think it was Elstree. They'd already started the movie. I wasn't allowed to be told what movie it was. And there was George and Richard Marquand, as you know now, the director. And we chatted. I can't remember what it was about. It was about 10 minutes, very polite, nice conversation. He didn't talk about his film, anybody's film, my acting, anybody's acting. And he said, thanks for coming. And then as I left the door, opened the door, and I heard him say to Richard, he says he never said this, but I heard it, great nose. And I think the fact that I had this nose. It might have been the clincher. But the casting director had also seen me play a very old person in a very intimate theatre. So I guess, don't know, I guess she'd said to George, this guy who's 37 and he can play really old. So George went, get him in. Because it was originally supposed to be played by an actor who was very old, but also, sadly, very uninsurable. So that was my first encounter with Star Wars. And then I got a script with a completely different title. And I saw that it wasn't a bad part. And then I went into makeup. And, you know, and 4 hours later, I emerged as this creature. And I'd fallen asleep. Nick Dadman, brilliant makeup artist, he said, the best thing you, I said, how can I help? Is there anything I can do? He said, yes, you can fall asleep. I was, you know, 4 a.m. I said, I can probably manage that. So when I woke up, I saw this horrible face in the mirror, and I screamed. And every time I look in the mirror, I always scream. Even, you know, now I'm the real age, it gets worse. But that's by the by. When I saw the face, I thought, oh, I have to find a voice that goes with that. So that's what led to digging deep into my entrails. So to come up with something that matched that face.
So the costume and the face inspired the voice. You didn't have the voice before?
No.
Okay.
No, it was exactly that. And Clive Revill, who very sadly died recently, who was the original voice in Empire Strikes Back, and he didn't really, George told him even less than he told anybody else. And later on, he was amazed to discover that he knew he wasn't going to be on screen because he wasn't filmed, but his voice came out of this actress in a sort of monkey mask. So it's always been a long journey. But I had the good fortune of actually seeing my face and get down. But when I was filming it, you know, George never gave many acting notes. And anyway, Richard was the director. And I think one of the reasons he'd asked Richard to direct is he didn't feel that he was most useful to actors in telling them, you know, what maybe they should do and, you know, or improve or, you know, cut a bit or, you know, move a bit to the right on set. So Richard was there to do that. And Richard one day said to me, I'm going to give you a tape of Clive Revill's voice. And if you can get your voice close to that, George might let you keep it. Well, I was completely horrified. This was Richard, I guess it's true. And anyway, I listened to Clive's voice and I thought, well, if Clive had seen the face that he might ultimately have become, he was a very brilliant, versatile actor, he certainly wouldn't have used his own voice. So he would be doing something along the lines of what I was doing. But I didn't really know until we got into the recording studio and dubbed the whole part. Practically all of the films of these big films were revoiced in these days because they couldn't balance the sound. I mean, and also sometimes being in a sound studio is a bit like this. You're always competing with some other kind of noise, and they couldn't simply identify single voices. Now they can. It's a big improvement, let me tell you. And I was in the recording studio with George, obviously, and Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy, who I met for the first time. Very exciting, very nerve-wracking. Well, they couldn't have been nicer. And I started to do it. And Steven sort of said out loud, he didn't really turn to it. He's like, my God, he's so evil. So I thought, oh, I guess I'm going to keep my voice. So there you go, that's the history of the ultimate history of the voice. And then on, of course, it was a big advantage to have gone down there, when I could just sort of talk like me later on. So that was another, you know, character development that I knew nothing about.
Je vais pas pouvoir traduire tout là. Mais I said I don't think I'll be able to translate all of that.
Why not?
I'm going to try.
No.
J'avais demandé en fait au début c'était quoi sa réaction quand il a reçu le texte pour la première fois. Et il avait déjà vu Star Wars, donc il avait déjà confiance que ça allait être un bon film. Et quand il a fait l'audition, la chose qu'ils leur ont dit, c'est quand il a reçu une note, c'était un super nez. Il avait un super nez apparemment. Et en fait, il a trouvé la voix quand il a reçu tout le maquillage. Donc, moi, je croyais qu'en fait, il avait déjà la voix. Mais en fait, non, c'est la voix qu'il a trouvée après qu'il est... En fait, quand il était dans le maquillage, il a pu s'endormir. Donc, il s'est endormi en tant que Ian McDiarmid. Et après, il s'est réveillé et il était Palpatine. il y avait tout le maquillage et tout ça, et il a eu peur. You actually was scared, right? You jumped when you saw yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't believe it. It was a horrible sight. Still is.
And so, et donc il a trouvé la voix quand il s'est vu. Et au début, Palpatine n'avait pas une voix qui ressemble au visage de Palpatine. C'était une voix assez normale. Et il savait que le comédien n'allait pas jouer cette voix s'il avait vu à quoi ressemble Palpatine. Donc lui, il a fait la décision de changer la voix, en fait. De changer la voix. C'est Patrick Bruel, ça? What weird reference. Donc voilà. Il y a une autre question? Oui, monsieur?
Hello, my lord. Can you act the scene when you become emperor?
What now?
Yes?
No, you have to pay me. You haven't got and I don't accept checks.
Il a demandé s'il pouvait jouer Palpatine sur scène, et bien sûr que non, parce qu'on le paye beaucoup.
It's one character, but what do they like to do the transformation?
Can you tell us a little bit more about your transition from one character to the other? Un petit peu plus sur la transition entre les deux personnages.
Yes. Well, the thing is, of course, as you know, he was always the one character. Even when I was playing the senator at the beginning, he was underneath. And George said a very interesting thing, George Lucas, when we were, you see, he said, you know, he wasn't very good at speaking to actors. He gave me lots of help, and in this particular way, he said, you should think of your face, Ian's face, as Palpatine, we didn't know, you know, he was going to be emperor, but as Sidious's mask. So in other words, all of this that you still see, and indeed the voice, and indeed the eyes, that was the most helpful bit of all. I should see as if there was something inside me that was wearing that. Now, that sort of note for an actor is just amazing. You think, yeah, I know what you're doing. It also meant, not that I was going to anyway, I didn't have to do sort of sly bits where you thought, you know, anyway, you all knew I was going to be emperor in the end. But I had to do sly evil bits. I could just make him even more straight, even more charming, even more with a nice sense of humour, even more getting on with everybody and being so loyal to the princess. And I mean, I was going to do that anyway, but actually getting that image from George was enormously helpful.
Une des choses que George ne faisait pas avant, c'était donner des notes aux acteurs. Il n'avait pas de confiance. Mais un jour, il a donné une note qui est, au lieu de penser que tu mets le masque de Palpatine, en fait, c'est son visage à lui, c'est le masque de Palpatine. Tu vois? Il n'y a pas de différence, il n'y a pas une transition entre les deux. Ils sont le même. Donc, quand il joue le sénateur et il est loyal à la princesse, il sait qu'il y a toujours Palpatine à l'intérieur, tu vois, caché. Donc il n'y a pas vraiment une différence. C'est un petit peu un jeu, mais pour lui, il n'y avait pas de transition.
A little thing. There was one moment, I think you all probably remember it, when the Sidious Palpatine inside escaped when he was just being, you know, the politician. And that's the scene where Anakin is a little bit slow to kill Count Dooku. And so, and people ask me to do this all the time, so I won't charge you for this. We did many takes when I, you know, persuaded him to kill Dooku in a very sort of straightforward politician-like way. And then on the nth take, I went, do it! And George went, that's the one. Because, you know, a little bit of what you were going to later see had escaped. I hadn't thought of it like that, but, you know, it was great. And that's an example of a happy accident happening in the moment on set. And if you can edit them, they're always the best.
Un des moments qu'il a adoré, en fait, c'était une sorte de transition. C'est quand il jouait en tant que sénateur et il invoque à Anakin, il dit à Anakin, tue Count Dooku, allez vas-y, tue-le. Et il y a un moment où la voix sort et il savait pas qu'il allait le faire, en fait, c'était sorti. You know that moment when you do it came out as Palpatine? Did it surprise you? As in like, because
yes,
he didn't know you were
it was sort of half joking because we'd done it so many times. You know?
Right.
And it was a little cheeky of me to do it, as it were. And it just, and I thought, well, I'll have to do that again, that wasn't right. But George immediately sensed that something had happened. And it didn't mean he was going to use it in the final, edit of the film, but he did. So it was...
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you had a few takes when you said it as you wanted to say it.
Yes, exactly. Well, you see, it was never going to stop. I'm going to do it again. So Ian was slightly, losing my patience. I'm an actor, we do things over and over again. But and he said, always trying to do it in a different way. But the one I thought was probably least successful as the Chancellor turned out to be most successful because of what we've just talked about.
Let me ask you, what challenges did you come across having Palpatine underneath your skin, Ian McDiarmid? Because you learned so much about the manifestation of evil. Essentially, that's what Palpatine is.
Yes.
So after being with him for so many years, he is in you.
Yeah.
So how do you play with the relationship that you have within of Palpatine and Ian? Comment est-ce qu'il joue à la vie, au jeu de la vie, en tant qu'Ian, parce que ça fait tellement d'années qu'il a joué Palpatine, que Palpatine maintenant existe en lui. Et donc comment est-ce qu'il peut réconcilier la façon dont il s'engage avec la vie en tant que quelqu'un qui a aussi un peu de evil en lui, un peu de mal?
Well, it's true, I think, that most actors really like playing bad guys. Particularly British actors, I think. There's something, don't quote me, I know you won't, there's something releasing about it, I suppose. Also, a friend of mine who's actually with me today, I watch a lot of politics on television. It's not the politics I watch, it's politicians. And he says, how can you watch all that stuff? Well, they just go on and say the same things, they lie and so on. But I suppose as an actor, I'm sort of observing how many different ways people cannot tell the truth. People can, as it were, go down a path that you think, no, that's not right. And I dare say I'll put the TV on in the room tonight and see somebody on CNN or BBC or something, and I'll think, that's interesting. I don't believe a word he's saying, but I see what he's doing. So as an actor, that's always been interesting to do. But I used to get parts before I played Palpatine that sort of encourage you to explore that sort of thing. I suppose the most obvious one was Satan in Milton's great poem, Paradise Lost. And he is the fallen angel, of course. And, God kicks him out because he's in danger of becoming too powerful. And Satan never forgives God. And then we're back to Revenge of the Sith. He spends his whole time trying to get back at him, seeking revenge. And that's another, we haven't talked about that yet, but that's another quality you notice in politicians. If they haven't got their way and they know certain people have stood in their way, when they do get to positions of power, they stamp them right into the ground.
Une des choses qu'il aime bien explorer avec maintenant sa sagesse de ce personnage comme Palpatine, c'est voir les réflexions dans les politiciens autour du monde. La façon dont il trouve des moyens à ne pas dire la vérité. Et il aime bien, il aime bien voir ça parce que c'est une exploration en tant que comédien de voir comment le mal peut se manifester dans les politiciens et tout ça. Donc
I think the word forgiveness means nothing to them.
Le mot forgiveness, se pardonner, ça n'existe plus dans leur vocabulaire en fait. A couple more questions and then I believe you have to shoot off.
Yeah.
How long have you got?
I don't know, what time is it?
The Infinite. You've got.
I don't want to disappoint you. Very long queue of people at the table.
It's 1:35.
Okay, 5 minutes. What about that?
Okay, 5 minutes. Donc, il y a des autres questions? Est-ce que c'est possible de venir un peu plus près parce que je peux...
Là, pas possible. Devant...
Passez le micro, s'il vous plaît.
So, you played the greatest evil of all the Star Wars. If you had the opportunity to play a good side character, which one would it be?
Jesus Christ. Yeah. No, that's not good enough. I'd only settle for God. I know he is God, but you know what I mean. His dad.
Il aimerait bien jouer Jésus ou Dieu. J'ai oublié de traduire ça, mais il a joué Satan dans une performance de Paradise Lost, Paradis perdu par John Milton. Donc, yeah, so you actually play Satan, you'd like to play God, you'd like to play Jesus.
Yeah, you know.
I mean,
I'm up for anything, really. You know.
Why not? Il y a des autres questions? Yes, monsieur là-bas.
I didn't hear that at all. They're not switched on. No. Share it with our friend. Yes. Yeah.
Hello?
You're switched on. Yeah.
What things from Shakespeare did you learn that you definitely knew would help to create Palpatine?
Well, it's back to what I said earlier, really. I mean, you sort of feel with Shakespeare, you know, he was just an ordinary guy from Stratford-on-Avon. You know, he wasn't, he always had a great mind, but he wasn't super educated and everything else. Just every now and again when I see a Shakespeare play, there's a line that stands out. And you think, yeah, well, he really knew about human beings, didn't he? So I wouldn't pick any one particular phrase. I would just say, you know, the greatest, and I'll be lucky to have him in English, the greatest playwright who ever lived, is just full of clues about how to live your life and how to avoid certain things, but how to, more important than that, how to embrace certain things. So most actors would say, you know, those who work on stage primarily, that Shakespeare was the great teacher.
Il n'y a pas vraiment une chose qu'il a appris de Shakespeare. En fait, il y a plein d'indices dans tout le travail que Shakespeare a fait. Donc, Shakespeare est devenu un professeur pour pas seulement lui, mais tous les comédiens en Angleterre. C'est un homme qui est assez normal, mais qui a trouvé une façon de trouver l'universalité de tous les thèmes que les humains vivent. Et c'est une chose que lui, il a appris, quoi. There's a phrase that I once came across, I think it's Manly P. Hall, who said, "Those who do not know that the Prince of Darkness is the same face as the King of Light knows not me," which I think was in reference to God, as in, how can you have Sith? You can't have Sith without Jedi. You can't have Yin without Yang.
Exactly. Yes.
Therefore, let's say you see the rise of authoritarianism and lying politicians and cruel politicians, and yet you know that they are a necessity for balance. How does one manage to live life with that?
Yes, and the interesting thing about the empires, you know, a few of them about, I just mentioned the obvious one, the Russian Empire. I won't get too contentious by giving you a list of others. They always collapse from within. Maybe it'll take a long time, but it's usually the person himself or herself, or the people, the yes men or women around her, who conspire to bring down what they supported in the first place. Now we're back to Star Wars again. That tends to be what happens to an empire. So it's always comforting to think, you know, maybe one day it won't happen, but I don't believe that. In an authoritarian regime, one day it'll fall apart and something better will emerge.
Donc une chose que je lui avais dit, c'est qu'il y a une phrase que j'ai rencontrée un jour, ça se dit pas ça, mais ceux qui ne savent pas que le prince des ténèbres ait le même visage que le roi de la lumière ne me connaissent pas. Et en fait, c'est la dualité de Dieu, en fait. C'est le yin et le yang, le Sith et le Jedi. Et donc, si on a besoin des deux, comment est-ce qu'on peut vivre dans un monde où on voit des politiciens qui deviennent cruels et tout ça? Comment est-ce qu'on peut faire ça? Et il a dit que le fait qu'il a étudié les empires, empires c'est ça, on dit empires, donc le fait qu'il a étudié les empires, en quelque sorte ça lui donne un peu de confort de voir que les choses, c'est comme des vagues, il y a des hauts, il y a des bas, il y a des changements de choses, des changements de pouvoir. Bien sûr on ne va pas voir le Sith dans notre monde, nous peut-être, mais c'est une sorte de confort. Que les histoires que lui fait dans Shakespeare, dans Star Wars, il y a aussi dans nos histoires Et en fait, c'est un confort.
Yes, I mean, your country is a very good example. All those years ago, the end of the 18th century, it was very bloody, and it took a while, you know, it got better.
Ouais, donc un exemple, c'est l'Empire de la France. Après Napoléon, il a envahi presque tous les pays, il a essayé la Russie, il a perdu. Mais ça, c'était un exemple en fait. Donc la France a perdu beaucoup de gens, c'était une bataille très saignante, ça se dit ça. Mais tout d'un coup, les choses regrandissent. Tu vois, il y a l'hiver, et après il y a le printemps, il y a l'été, tout ça. Donc c'est les vagues, it's just waves, it's balances of changes.
Absolutely, justement.
One more question, une question et on partit. One more question. It better be good. Yes. Monsieur.
Est-ce que vous avez été bouleversé quand alors, votre personnage est mort dans l'ascension de la force, l'ascension de Skywalker dans l'épisode 9?
S'il vous plaît.
Très bonne question. Et merci de l'avoir fait en français, comme ça je ne dois pas le traduire. How did you feel about your death in the latest episode?
I'm still alive. No, I am in my soul. No, his soul's still alive, it's floating around somewhere. No, I think he's had it this time. But you know, as I said, he had plan B when the first thing happened to him, his horrible injuries. So it would be very difficult to imagine he had a plan C and a plan D after what happened to him, his face and his body, thank you granddaughter, in that film. But you know, there's always the hologram, there's always the screen ghost, so you never know. But I'm not hedging, I don't know because nobody's told me. But then in the Star Wars universe, nobody tells you anything.
If, let's say, Palpatine was never to come back, are you happy to put him to rest?
Not happy, but you know, I think.
Would you like to
Well, the thing is, you know, when JJ phoned me up and said, "We think Palpatine's still alive. Okay. What do you think about it?" I said, "Well, I don't want anyone else to play him." So
yeah, right.
that would. But one day, I hope that a younger, very skilled, of course, actor does play him in his young incarnation before he reached 50 or whatever I was. When I was a senator for the first time.
Donc il a frimé là, il a dit quand JJ m'a téléphoné, that was so cool when JJ just called me.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Abraham.
Donc
JJ to everybody, not just to us.
Donc JJ l'a téléphoné, il a dit qu'il croit que Palpatine est toujours vivant, donc on va voir ce qui va se passer dans le monde de Star Wars, parce qu'il y a toujours des hologrammes et tout ça, et bien sûr l'esprit de Palpatine vit toujours. Donc on ne sait pas ce qui va se passer. Palpatine avait déjà un plan B, et peut-être qu'il y a un plan C, mais probablement pas. Mais je crois que Ian, you would like to play Palpatine again, of course.
Well, you know, he's been a large part of my life. I wouldn't mind if he was a little part of my approaching death. Oh, that was more.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's good. I like that. Palpatine a fait vraiment beaucoup de parties de sa vie, et maintenant qu'il approche sa mort, ça serait sympa que Palpatine serait là aussi. Donc voilà.
I've got no immediate plans to die, by the way, just in case any false rumors.
Il n'a pas de plan à mourir, donc on verra. Peut-être qu'il y aura temps de jouer Palpatine. Mais mesdames et messieurs, Ian McDiarmid!
Mesdames et messieurs, merci beaucoup.
Vous avez bougé après ou pas? Parce que nous on est photographe si vous voulez, donc c'est juste devant, donc et rien que de la patate et tout si vous voulez. Il est gentil mais il y a des limites.